What are humanitarian bombings? Of course, bombings of any sort, in contrast to any humanitarian effort. However, the humanitarian aid rendered by NATO sometimes needs to enter hostile areas to rescue indigenous people fleeing the horrors of war. In order to apply humanitarian support, NATO must sometimes bomb the towns and villages and other large areas in the interest of humanitarian aid and overall peace. These bombings are known in some circles as humanitarian bombings. At the end of the 20th century, Serbian leader Slobodan Milosevic acted as the European Union villain, ripe for regime change.
President Milosevic vowed to keep on fighting. Milosevic said it was absurd that Yugoslavia should accept what he called NATO's, quote, fascist approach.
Milosevic was charged with the slaughter of countless civilians and a litany of war crimes, dying before his trial concluded for the alleged violations. In March of '99, NATO responded to Milosevic.
These pictures of what is alleged to be Albanian refugees struck by a NATO missile. Serbian officials claim that there were two separate attacks, killing, they say, dozens of civilians, 60 plus or more. NATO acknowledges that it was targeting what it says were military convoys in the general area.
NATO bombs were reported to contain depleted uranium, a chemical weapon that for several decades has wreaked havoc on not only enemy forces, but Western forces as well. In this photo, standing next to General Wesley Clark, is indicted war criminal Agam Shekum. In January of '99, General Shekum retires his commission in the Croatian Armed Forces to take command of the KLA, or Kosovo Liberation Army, while pending war criminal charges that would later be dropped. Shekum would become Prime Minister of the country in 2006. In April of '99, The Telegraph UK wrote a story exposing NATO's training of the KLA, the latest evidence of growing cooperation between NATO and the KLA, once denounced by the West leaders as terrorists and dismissed by military strategists as a ragtag force.
Large numbers of Kosovar Albanians herded around Kosovo like groups of migratory cattle.
The alliance spokesman James Shea enthusiastically predicted that the KLA would rise from the ashes to play an increasingly important role in the current campaign. 1 year earlier, in February of '98, Clinton's special envoy to the Balkans, Robert S. Gelbard, had even called the KLA terrorist, though the Clinton administration quickly backed away from that term. The paper writes, despite public denials throughout the war, the CIA worked closely with the KLA to glean intelligence about the disposition of Yugoslav troops in Kosovo. In fact, the CIA and NATO had been working with the KLA since late April 1999. To avoid working directly with the KLA, however, the U.S. military used the Albanian Second Army as an intermediary, according to the U.S. European Command. But U.S. officials say they were reluctant to become deeply involved with the KLA. The rebels had allegedly committed atrocities and were involved in drug smuggling, according to intelligence reports.
NATO is bombing Libya longer than it was bombing Yugoslavia several years ago, and there is no end in sight. It's obvious that politics is a cynical matter.
The protest came from people who want the United States and NATO to stop bombing in Libya, with the mission of protecting Libyan people from the country's military.
The intended target during last night's airstrike in Tripoli was a military missile site. However, from our initial assessment of the facts, it appears that one weapon did not strike the intended target due to a weapons systems failure.
Although officials in Tripoli claim more than 800 civilians have died in NATO raids.
The counter-protests feature people waving Libyan flags and calling on NATO to keep helping the rebels fight against Muammar Gaddafi's government. These protesters say NATO bombing is effective in stopping Gaddafi's military from attacking its own people.
What we want is Gaddafi's forces to be eliminated. They've been killing Libyan people.
From May until October of 2011, humanitarian bombing on Libya killed thousands of Libyan civilians, NATO only admitting to a fraction of those deaths. One NATO bomb was on a news company, bombed on 20 July of 2011, killing 3 media workers, injuring 21. Director General Irina Bokova of the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization stated that media outlets should not be targeted in military actions. Yet no actions were taken by the UN or anyone else for the attack and murders of these media workers. The harboring and promoting of war criminals, the use of chemical weapons, affiliations with more terrorist groups. A war in Ukraine, money, NATO, respect.